Hey, welcome back to the podcast. For today's episode, I have my friend Greg here. He is the backbone of society by being an English teacher in Vietnam, despite being Brazilian. So he moved across the whole world. And today I hope to pick his brain on, well, first of all, how to become an English teacher, why to become an English teacher, and I think what is really interesting for everyone else, where does he see teaching going, and what can we learn from teachers in general, like how to handle kids or maybe adults. What's the difference? Yeah. Thank you, Greg, for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And as I mentioned before, you're calling in from Hanoi, Vietnam, right? That's where you're a teacher?
Yeah, I'm calling from Hanoi right now. Yes, we do have a time difference. I suppose it's early morning there in England, right? I'm a few
Uh,
hours ahead, I would say.
yeah, depends on what you call early. 9 a.m. is early for me, and for most people, it's not. All right, just to get it started. So you're an English teacher at which school in Hanoi?
I'm teaching for the British Council right now.
And there's a lot of different schools as well, right? Because you've been at Apollo before.
Just to give you like a clearer picture thing for the listener, like I'm teaching English for centers, so we do have like schools which usually run like Monday to Friday programs, slightly different depending on the school. Like you have different curriculums, right? Different programs. I've been teaching mostly for centers, so the schedule is a little bit different. So those usually are when kids are adults, they're off their working hours are off their studying hours. So after class or weekends. That's the main point. This is an extracurricular activity. So we do get many kids, Vietnamese kids or Korean or Japanese, mostly those because they're here in Asia. So it's yeah, I would say there are two different kind of programs, but just to clarify, so I do teach. It's quite similar to be honest. Mostly it's just the schedule. I think a lot of the techniques and a lot of the technology that originated from the British Council, which was the soft power organization from the British to pretty much teach English everywhere,
Yeah.
so people could go back and study in the UK and finance their universities. So yeah, just to give you a clearer picture, so this is how I teach right now. So I'm not a Monday to Friday teacher, but I do teach for centers and curriculum is a bit different, but the main goal, the main outcome is pretty much the same, which is to make people speak better English and to pass the standardized exams and to go and study abroad or to work abroad. Why it's still possible, right? We don't know how that's going to change, but just to give to the listener a clear background of what I do.
Yeah. And as we mentioned earlier, so you're Brazilian in
Yeah,
Vietnam. I know a few of your colleagues who are from all different places. So
yeah.
actually, I think the colleagues of yours that I know that are from like a previous school you taught at. Do most of those after activity schools work the same way? Like I mentioned Apollo earlier.
Mm.
Um, does it work the same way as the school you're at now?
Similarly, they were run like a center. Yeah. So yeah.
All right. So the question here is, how come you came all the way from Brazil? What's your backstory coming from all the way from Brazil to Vietnam, and then becoming a teacher? Like, was that always a plan to become a teacher, or
Yeah, I would like to say yes. I think I would look really great if to say it was always been a plan. I had like, career goals and I was just following them all throughout. Uh, but it was really by chance. I mean, I've always been involved with like in tutoring and like extra school classes. Don't get me wrong, I love talking and I love just being around people like overall. My background was communication, so I studied journalism when that was still a job, but you podcasters took that away from us now. But yeah, I started studying communications. I was just really into learning, I would say more than teaching, so I think that was my starting point. And then I was working with translation after I finished uni, some like writing, but mostly like a translation. And then I had a partner who was teaching. So it started from her really
she
like,
was teaching here in Vietnam?
no, she was teaching in Brazil actually. That's how we met. So
Ah, okay, yeah,
yeah. So she was teaching in Brazil, and I was already involved in some projects. So I worked with this good friend who had like a social business. I don't know how they call it these days, like a 2.5. I don't know. Like it's like not an NGO, but it's not really a business. So it's just like a model that tries
yeah,
to be self-sustainable. So I don't know, they're still running. Actually, I don't know if they've changed their business model, but basically they were going to slums back in Brazil and trying to teach English there, which
yeah.
was itself a pretty big challenge.
You actually
And
told me about that one at one point.
yeah,
Just
so
really
that's like
interesting.
she was working. Yeah, she was volunteering for them and also working for different organizations. That's how we met. I
One
never, I
point on
was
the
not really
slums
into.
is you mentioned once that you as a teacher had no problem walking into the slum,
I
despite it being
was
a
I
high
was shitting
crime.
myself. I mean, I had no contact with that, right? Like, I mean, when you say Brazil, of course, you imagine like you're always, but there's so many bubbles. And first time I went there, I was like, when am I gonna get shot? And then realized, oh, actually, there is a community there. People go do, their daily thing. So it's just I had a lot of just not prejudice. I mean, it's not the right word, but I just had a lot of preconceptions of how it would be. And then actually, when you go there, it's like, oh, it's pretty different. Like, it's just yeah, it's just the way it was portrayed. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there are things happening there, but we have millions of people living in those places. So of course, there is normal life. There's a normal economy. There are regular activities going on. So that was a pretty good experience, I would say. It helped me grow in many ways. It changed, I was a bit shielded, I would say, from that before. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
Do I remember correctly as well that you said it is safe as long as you're a teacher and people in the community know you are a teacher?
So basically, so at university as well, like because I was studying journalism and it's a public university, right? So it's funded by people's taxes, and I kind of lost touch with how they're doing things back in Brazil. But back in the day, like we used to have subjects where you had to go to the communities and you had to, like, for example, we were studying journalism, right? So we had to go and write the local newspaper for them. So we're pretty much doing a service for that place. So if you just walk into that community, they would probably like, what are you here for? Are you here to buy drugs or what's up? But then actually when I go, oh no, I'm studying at university there, and then they already knew like, okay, oh, you're here to write the newspaper. Oh, cool, cool. And then they would open up and they know, okay, you're just going about your business and that's fine. And then they would joke around. So, when your famous journalists come back, we don't want you guys to just be here when you're at uni. Like, so you could joke around and they had more respect. But generally speaking, yes. Of course, like then it's just like who lives in those communities. Like most are just regular people. Of course, you have people doing other economic activities, but they're also just going about their business. They don't really care too much about you, especially when you're a student or they're just there working. They don't have much power. But you still have to pay attention to things. Generally, I would say they would still respect you, but there are too many people around. I think especially kids as in like 16, 17-year-old kids, and they might not really respect those rules. I think this has changed a little bit. I remember some stories back from there when like there were some issues with kids who used to leave their communities to just go and mug rich university students, right? And there was some issues with people who control those communities saying, hey, those are our customers, both for drugs, but also, the university itself for services. So we don't want to somehow jeopardize their health. So do not commit crimes or do not do any illegal activities in that perimeter. So there used to be some friction and some issues. I don't know how it's going back these days, but yeah, just to go back to your question, it's much more complex than I think than you would believe. That I believe being a Brazilian, so there's just so many things happening in those places, and dynamic is just not very clear from outside, I would say. But generally speaking, like I really enjoyed it. I think it really helped me like to see sides of things or things that I would just not see on the media and everything. So it was just like let's say my we call like a quinceanera, like the party in other Latin countries. It's just like, okay, this is my first real experience outside of my bubble, outside of my parents, outside of like this controlled environment. I say, okay, the world is complex, the world is different. The way I think things is not necessarily what things are. So I think that was a pretty good experience in that sense. And then met my partner, my former partner, and then she was a really good teacher, and she really shared her love for teaching. We started moving around, and then we lived in Portugal for a while. We lived in England for a while. I was not teaching; she was translating. I was translating; she was teaching. And then at some point, she got a job offer to come here to Vietnam. I was just working remotely as a translator, so it was not even part of the plan. But once I came here, and after having worked remotely for a year and a half or so, like I did realize, I missed interacting with people. So that's when I started my CELTA, which is a course to become an English teacher. So that's pretty much the backstory.
Because I looked at the price for the CELTA certificate,
Yeah.
which is quite hefty just to become a teacher, at least from what I think. It's a
Yeah.
1,600 euro USD.
Yeah.
Um, did you have to pay it yourself, or did the school pay it for you?
Sadly, I was not sponsored, but most centers nowadays, because it is getting harder to recruit people, they do offer like employment. That's closer to the mic. They do offer, if you like work for them for a year, so they can actually like sponsor that, so they kind of pay you back. So it's getting
Yeah.
pretty common, not only with Celta, but I do have other friends working for schools, and even for like PGCs or qualified teaching certificates from the US. Like they are sponsoring once you get in, just because you're spot on. I think it's a big investment, and not only the actual money that you invest, but also it's an intensive course. This at least how I did it, right? So I
Yeah.
had to stop my translations for a whole month. It was like a Monday to Friday all day course, and then the weekends I had to submit like essays and assessments. So you had to also pay the cost of missed opportunities, right, for not working that month. Once you actually check the how much teachers make in Europe or in the US, and sometimes it's barely above minimum wage. So I think it's
Yeah.
a pretty good question that you ask, and I think many people before they join schools they ask themselves these questions. But generally speaking, I do think that nowadays centers and schools they are more in need of people, so
Yeah.
it's easier to cut a deal. I would say, like, go around, ask around your schools, and if you push a little bit, like, I would say that you do have a chance of getting sponsored
Can the
to take those
certificate also be
courses.
used to be a teacher in actual school, or say actual schools, non-extracurricular schools? Can you like become a teacher at an international school or just Vietnamese school or?
You could. It depends on the program, right? So we do. It also depends on the country, I'll say. So I mean, some public schools have different. Some countries have different criteria for public schools, for regular schools. Bilingual schools usually operate with, or private schools in general, they operate with quite a lot of autonomy. So they can pretty much, as long as they can provide you with a work permit, and that's going to be based on the Ministry of Education of each country, right? So if you meet
Okay.
certain requirements, they have flexibility to just hire you, and you can go and teach. Um, but for international schools, it depends, like if they're following the IB or any other like curriculum. So it might be a little bit different. Usually, they require like a
Yeah.
PGCE, which is the British certificate, and or a KTS, which is the American certificate. But oftentimes, if you ask the right people, and if you have the right qualifications, or if you apply at the right time, you can get into those schools, and then they kind of sponsor you. So the condition is that you teach for them maybe part time, or you have a different arrangement, but on the side you are also studying to get those qualifications. So it is
Yeah.
possible. Like I've seen it happening plenty of times. During COVID was rather common because many people fled the country. Fled, no, that's the wrong expression. Sorry, flew away of the country. They had to leave the country. They're fleeing COVID, so I can say fled. So yeah, it is possible. It's not the most usual career pathway, I would say, but I do see happening with some frequency. So yeah, it is possible.
What would you say is the most common career pathway? Because I spoke to a colleague as well who told me like I think the average tenure is between 2 and 3 years. So is it oftentimes someone straight out of high school or uni who is like, oh, I want to live abroad for a few years. They go teach in
Hmm.
Vietnam or maybe any other country, and then they go
Yeah.
back home, work in a different career, or because you've been doing this for 8 years, 9 years,
7 years, yeah.
7 years.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think especially like in Asia, like you do have just the turnover is pretty high, right? Like it's a lot of people who have just finished their undergrad degree, so it's like a gap year after you study. So a lot of people just come and say, "Hey, I want to experience living abroad for 1, 2 years." Half of them really enjoy, and then they try to. I mean, that was my case as well. Like I was not expecting, was not part of the plan. I was like, I'm going to be here for 6 months, and then 6 months, and then 6 months, and then 1 year, and then 1 year. But I do think it does happen. But yeah, the turnover is pretty high. I don't think it's a lot of people actually do when they live here, they stop teaching. I also do feel that the older, I mean, I really love teaching, but I can see it now, like after these many years, I have seen and worked with so many kids and adults and just so many people in general that at some point, like you do feel a bit worn out. There is also this, so teaching is very like energy intensive. You're always in front of people, and you're always there, like the spotlight for the good and for the bad. But at some point, I can see it taking its toll. So I would say that many people love it. They do it for a few years, and then they try other things, and then they move from, I know, teaching English to teaching biology, or to teaching maybe something more related to their undergrad. As they go to university. So the career paths start like,
that's maybe the first step. I would say many people start there, and then they start like figuring out other ways of maybe staying in this industry, but maybe going to like more of a niche or just different subjects as well. Because at some point you cannot teach. You get tired of seeing the verb to be. Like it's like you enjoy,
Yeah.
but you also feel like I want to teach new things and I want to learn new things as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very, very, very good point. I would say a lot of the industry, like many people come here in their like early 20s. They stay for 2, 3 years here. They travel around Asia during their breaks. Overall, they all have a really good experience. But especially if you're coming from the UK, if you're coming from America or other developed country, the salary is good if you want to travel, if you want to, have us maybe gives you a good experience, especially the purchasing power that you have. But if you want to settle back home again, then that's a totally different business. So how are you going to save money making like to buy a house there? So you do really have to say, okay, I really love Asia to the extent that I want to be here and maybe buy property here or
Yeah.
live my life here. So then I would say it does make sense. And I'll say Asia is still like ahead compared to developed countries in how they see and treat teachers, because for most people, not only foreign teachers, but generally speaking, there is still some status to being a teacher in these countries.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, from when I visited you in Vietnam, Vietnam seems super safe. It seems like almost heaven on earth. That's how I kind of perceived it. On the note of career progression as well, because I know within your organization as well, you can, of course, become a senior teacher, but you can also go into management. Or that the career progressions you have in there? Because as I can imagine, once you do management for a few years, you can also jump into other businesses and just continue the management track, right? So are there some people that can just become like a head teacher or just a full-time management within a school, and do they then just switch to but any other organization afterwards? Because I assume once you go into management, like your colleague Rod or ex-colleague Rod,
Yeah.
then he at this point has the opportunity to just switch to any other career.
I think ideally, yes. I mean, we would assume that those are somehow universal skills, right? Like that. I mean, if you're managing people, but there are some, I think, specificities, like when it comes to managing. I mean, honestly, I don't know, because I've worked for other industries, but like internships and never as a manager, so it's hard for me to compare in that sense. But I do think that managing teachers, especially the ones who work with young learners, with kids, the kinds of questions they ask and the kinds of needs that they have, they are slightly different from maybe a desk job or any kind of other job. I don't say that in a pejorative way. I think they're just different. Like, I'm not saying one is better or worse. I just think
Yeah,
the needs of your employees are very different if you're working like a factory line or if you're working with data and
okay,
if you're
nice.
working with. So I just think that's the case. So I do think, but some skills I think are very transferable, right? I think just dealing with stress. I think that's a big one. I think for managers, different kinds of segments of different industries. It's transferable. I do not know exactly. I also do think though that what you studied, your bachelor degree also do matter. So for example, for him, he studied economics, right? So he can
Yeah,
still like
makes sense.
somehow steer the direction of his ship and say, hey, I studied economics and I did teaching, but also did a lot of management. So I could apply my theoretical background. So I do think it depends also how you sell yourself. I do think it's not as such a smooth transition. I would say it does depend on what's your past, what are your past studies. So yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of language, well, you said you also worked in translations, right?
Yeah.
How does that compare? Is it like a similar level or type of English you need to acquire? Maybe as well, a quick
Hmm.
question for translations. Is that still a lucrative business now with all those
Great question.
AI models coming out?
Great question. I got an email like 4 months ago just saying, "Hey guys, sorry, we've been using all your translations to train our AI model, so we had all those projects aligned." So I mean, honestly, like I think I'm a bit lucky because I could see it coming. Um, I mean, I think everyone could see it coming somehow, but I think I was just a bit lucky that I had other things going on, so it was not like diversify your portfolio kind of thing. So I think I was just a bit lucky in that sense that I was not 100% relying on those, but it was like, I think for many people, I mean, even I got a bit upset, because I did have some projects aligned. So it was like, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's gone. Like, it's a part of, it's just,
It's also nothing with you fact checking the AI. Is that not an industry either?
It it depends on what kind of translation you do, right? So if you're like translating a report. So I've worked with some organizations like Human Rights Watch, which is like it's more like translating. You have to actually put your imprint, or you have to really translate like a journalist article, like an article, and you have to really make it interesting, and you have to do something that which require more style. And I do think some of those organizations maybe they're still employing people and they might rely on people a little bit more. I don't know for how long, but I do think that original writing, and although I actually don't know how advanced those models are, I haven't done the experiment of like uploading all of my writings and asking
Yeah.
them to generate something. But every time I ask them to generate something, it's still pretty mechanic. And so I do think some more creative industries, I think is not that immediate, but like I've been translating for softwares for a while, and that's gone because it's just strings, and it doesn't need to be that
I guess it's very
creative.
factual.
Yeah, it's just like, to be honest, like it's also, I hate the fact that I'm losing income, but also I see that to translate software, to translate some technical things, honestly, like I do think that it's a fine use of AI, if you could call it, like in that sense. I mean, I feel really sorry for many people. I do feel, because also I do have a big chunk of my income going, but I do think, for example, it would be much sadder if we were to cut teaching jobs compared to translating software. So maybe
sense.
translating websites, translating, like an original piece of writing, like translating a book. Then, I think we should still rely on people. I think it's a very human side of it, but to translate software, I don't miss it, to be honest. Like, I miss the paychecks, but it's not like, oh, I'm learning something. It's incredible. It's just, it's a string. You go and you translate, and you're like, okay, fair enough.
You just mentioned the human side. I mean, the human side, I guess, is what will not be substituted that fast, like the actual teaching in person. You also mentioned you study psychology, right? You're a teacher. How does studying psychology play into that? Is that like, will it divert your career, or is this more to enhance your career?
I think it could go both ways. I think especially at this stage, I'm just halfway through my master, so I still have 1 year of study. So ideally, I mean, I still enjoy teaching, but I do feel also I am studying not just for enhancing my perspectives, but I think just to keep up with the young learners we've been receiving. I do feel that there is I mean, I don't want to say it like that, because sometimes you kind of feel like it's so many people talk about it and you feel like, I know they're just being pessimistic, and it's just not my vibe. I really like to, look forward and think of solutions rather than problems. But I do think that after COVID, especially with young learners, I'm seeing that many things have changed with like their attention span, their social skills. So I've been doing this for 7 years, right? Like I've been doing this consistently with groups before COVID and after COVID, and especially with like kids who skipped a lot of school, like the ones maybe the 4 to 7, and the one who are more exposed to. I mean, this is an assumption again. I do believe that they are being more exposed. Their parents are being less protective with like screen time and things like that. I do have some reasons to believe that, because they know many memes, and they're very, when they listen to songs, when they watch videos, they are really like laser focused. But the moment they have to deal with another human being, it's harder. So it's still like an assumption. I don't own the truth, so I don't know. But like, this is just from my perspective. I do believe that screen time has affected. What I can say for a fact that I've been seeing my classes and also hearing from other teachers, with young learners especially, is that they are clingier. So I think they've gotten used to receiving feedback so quickly and so colorful and so many powerful songs all the time, and they're just interacting with their phones, and like they're just dealing with this huge amount of like dopamine, which is like, and they're just like always highly motivated by things that are designed to trap them and to keep their attention, and they're really losing the, like, it's kind of sad. Sometimes they have like board games, right? And like usually when they're 5 or 6, they know, I mean, before COVID and even just the aftermath of COVID, they still know how to wait for their turn and to patiently, roll a die and not getting too angry and to kind of measure the emotion. I mean, they're still learning, but generally speaking, I never had many issues before COVID with that. Like, there's a learning curve, but once they figure out, okay, I cannot be the only person playing, otherwise everyone's gonna get angry at me and there is no game happening. But honestly, like the last year, like even just playing a board game with them, I mean, language related board game where they have to throw lines, they see a picture and they produce a sentence. They just cannot take turns, or they just cannot wait for their turn, or they're just very aggressive and they're just very like, I need it right away. I need the points. I need this. I need the reward. So I did feel that even the support network we have, a lot of the things when we study about like autism and ADHD, like a lot of those still date back to the 1980s or the 1990s, right? And they were pretty much setups or classroom management systems when we imagine maybe 1 out of 15 kids, or and now we are, you go to a class of 15, and before maybe you just have 1 or 2 kids who could possibly be neurodivergent or who were still not well trained, and now I have 4 or 5, and we don't have the resources and the infrastructure to actually update how we deal. This is not happening only with centers, English centers. I do that from a fact because I do know people working from top international schools here. At least they're being a bit more proactive, I would say. They're like financing special education needs courses. They're really trying hard to get people to learn more because it's happening more. Like, and it's more demanding, and this might change a little bit the nature of teaching in the upcoming years or the upcoming decades, or it's going fast. So I don't know. It's hard to predict. But I did feel like I need to learn more about it. Like I've been trying to have some like kind of ready-made templates once you start teaching. Like you have, okay, this is what you should do. This is a technique that used to work. So those have been my go-to, and they have worked so far really well. But I would say 1 or 2 years after COVID, I've noticed this pattern, and I realized, well, I need to learn more. Even people who are like my line managers or people above me, they seem to be a little bit out of their depth. Not only them, like, don't get me wrong, I think it's the whole sector, right? Like, it's something that's a phenomenon that's just so modern, but also so fast that we were not ready to tackle it. I was like, I want to learn more. Don't get me wrong, I'm not altruistic, not just for the kids, but also for myself. I also had that side of like, I want to learn more about how I process things. Maybe, I'm choosing the wrong side. Maybe actually this is an evolutive way of doing things, and maybe we are going to be more fast paced. I also just wanted to learn more, and I felt like, well, using the same templates and using the same techniques and doing the same things we've been doing, I mean, it probably is the same criticism we all had with our teachers, right? It's like, well,
Yeah.
you're all trying to keep us sitting down, and you're never like following the current trend. So I just wanted to give a more like honest go at that, and I didn't want to become maybe the teacher that I criticize, or at least like understand their perspective and say, okay, like now that I have studied, I understand why, and I get the whole point of it. But right now, I'm also, I still question that. It's like I just need to learn more, and I felt like I cannot stop. Like, I'm always teaching and asking people to learn and to do things to keep learning, and it's just unfair if I myself do not do that.
You mentioned quite a few things here. You very briefly mentioned how to manage a class, which is something I definitely want to get into as well, maybe some different techniques. You also mentioned that, well, teaching has changed, where I would like to ask for maybe some predictors, but as well, just before that, I'm also wondering, is this only just kids thing, or is this affecting everyone? Because I can tell you that unless I have someone next to me, like if I'm alone, I can't watch a full movie. Like I will default to looking at my phone. I'm way too hooked on like quick dopamine rushes, reels, like so much easier for me to follow. I sometimes play a board game called Catan with a friend. We tend to play it online, and he prefers playing one-on-one because he doesn't want to wait for everyone to finish their round, because one-on-one just goes so much faster.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things you mentioned about these kids I've witnessed in myself or in just other adults. So yeah, I can totally see what you said there with, well, there's also, you study psychology for yourself to maybe get more insights into this. Just back to where you see teaching going. You said you definitely don't know where it goes, but do you maybe have like one or two different theories? Will it go fully digitalized? Will be a completely different version in the classroom? Or
Another great point, existential questions, I think, like for many careers, right? Like people are asking that. I would say that like some aspects of it, like we can replace, I would say, like, assessments, how to create assessments, and maybe extra practice. And I think the question I have to ask ourselves is just like, even as adults, as you said, like, are those things making us smarter? Like, are they making us being more efficient? Or are they making us, not just that, are they making us happier in that sense? Because like, if we are meeting other needs, like if if kids are learning English or they're learning other subjects really well, if they're happy, if they're not anxious, maybe it is the right way forward. The only caveat that I have is just that not only with kids but also with teenagers, with adults, I think I'm quite lucky because they do know how much they pay for our courses. So I think they're just like, okay, they know that they can switch off, but like especially like hearing the num. So like I think with kids, my parents are forcing me, so it's much easier for them to like, yeah, I'm not gonna do it. Okay, but like with adults, usually they join our courses maybe for a year or so, and they have a really clear goal, right? Like, to get better, to move abroad or something. So they try a bit harder. So I haven't noticed that much as it is like maybe more endemic with kids and teenagers. And I think just like, and even as a psychologist, the question I ask myself is like difficult question as well, because maybe you can even, fearing us becoming obsolete. It's like, is it what I do the best way? Maybe it's not the most efficient. However, I think not the conclusion, but my thinking process so far, my thought process so far, what I do think and I do assume is that yes, some kids when they're exposed to their tablets or to more learning games or to more fast-paced, individualized, as your friend playing Katana, just getting that they are
Yeah.
learning faster the game, they are learning how to speak better, and maybe sometimes just they're having more fun whilst they're doing. But the main issue is when once they are not doing it, because I do feel that when you ask about the future of education, even those kids who are really wired, and actually those kids who are really wired and who are really into tablets, and they're like, those are actually the clingiest ones. Like those are clingiest. Those are the ones who really demand your attention. Those are the ones who misbehave. Those are the ones who actually want your approval so much. Like they are really, I feel like, in desperate need of a human eye. And I do think we do have all of those technologies, but we still are not able to overcome our biology sense, which is like, I want
Yeah.
someone looking at me and praising me. And a lot of times they defer to their tablets. They will still rather play with their parents. It's just a matter of like, they want still this, the one-on-one is still like something that we all, I think we all desire for, like to a certain, all, you get it. But like, I do think that even with podcasts, like I do think, okay, we're doing so many other things like which are digitalized, which are so efficient, which maybe are the best ways, but you can see like so many podcasts popping up. And what is a podcast? It's like time when you have to sit down and just talk about things. You're not being efficient. You're not like going
Yeah.
straight to the point, perhaps. You're just like old fashioned, giving attention, receiving attention. That's why I feel like there's always going to be a demand, I think, when you're talking about schooling people, educating people, because it's not only about teaching, right? But I think nowadays we're shifting more into like teaching soft skills, teaching like how to be a person, how to take turns, how to deal with your emotions. So I think that's maybe where the shift's gonna be. Is like, all right, we can teach maths, we can teach other subjects more efficiently doing that, but all of that efficiency is gonna have its byproduct, which is probably all of this need, this extra need that we somehow have to target. Like, and I do think like podcasts are a byproduct of that. I think many other activities like running clubs, I think all of those other things which are going the opposite direction of the digital world, like they are our biological need saying, okay, I know it's quite cool, we are on our, but we still have this need. We still, I think this whole, like, even like going to the gym, doing physical things, I think we have to balance this digital, theoretical, abstract world we live in, the actual physical, biological. I feel anxious, I feel happy. And I think the main challenge in the future is like, how can we make those two intersect in a point where we are happy? I think my main concern right now is that like you can see kids learning a lot, but they're more anxious, they are
Yeah.
jittery, they are awful at like talking. Like it's just hard to see. Like what I like about English classes is that like we have to force them to speak, right? And you have, because it's a communicative. You cannot just say, "Hey, listen," and just
Do you think it's
produce
going to
something.
continue with them as well speaking a lot to each other in class, or are we maybe moving to a world where they might do something similar to Duolingo, just way more advanced, of course, and then your
Yeah,
role is simply to correct for the lacking human parts, as in you will more supervise them. Are they doing what they should do? You're teaching
yeah,
them how to be patient and how to
yeah.
interact with actual people. Are you taking over maybe parts of parenting, of kind of raising the kid
Yeah, it's the
in that
human side
sense?
of it. Yes, I think so.
Is so you're more like you will turn into, yeah, the part that is correcting for how technology is teaching teaching in the language.
What they're lacking. Yeah, definitely, I agree with that. I think it's a great point.
Do you think it will continue being in person, or will at some point every kid just sit at home with their computer, do their exercises, and then maybe meet you from time to time? You be a full-time psychologist or something like that.
Yeah, I think like there are 2 points here. I think also school is mostly not about learning. I think that's something that we forget is mostly for our parents to drop us there and say, go. It is very important. During COVID, you could really see because many schools try to replicate this digital model, and parents are like, no, I'm paying because I want my kids to, just I have some me time with my wife, or I have time with my friends. And even when like mass education, the whole point of it is for us to maybe stay out of the street, right? It's like a contained, safe space where you can learn. So I do think also like when I started teaching, I was very like I thought like you have to be efficient. It's all about like all of that. But I do think from our society it has never been the main point. And even when I look back at my years at school, it's not the main thing I've learned. And also, if I were to be honest, how much more would you have learned if you've been homeschooled? Like imagine like
That's a
someone
very good
with
point.
more knowledge, someone more knowledgeable, giving you full attention, giving you full feedback. Even every time I have to like placement tests with kids who are homeschooled, usually their English is much better and they're much more curious. I do think the main point of schools have always been there's always been the teaching side of it for sure, but it's more like how do you talk to people, how do you convince people, how do you bully or not get bullied, how do those things work. So it is like it's a learning ground for you how to be part of a human species, and being part of a human species is not just about technical knowledge, but it's all of those innuendos or all of those things that are implicit and you just learn by going every day. So I think also that's something that I've learned to be a bit kinder to myself, because I always want them to squeeze every single day. I want them to learn the most, but it's like they've gone to school the whole day. Sometimes they just really are there, and I hope they're just making friends, and they're also wondering about life a little bit. And it's okay to have these on and off moments. I think this is just the main thing about our society, is that we are not allowed to have an off moment anymore. It's always like you have to be on all the time so you can be efficient. And I would be fully okay with that if there were no mental health issues attached to it. Like if we can get to a society where this happens and we are somehow, but you kind of just see the dark side of it. It's like, okay, we have all of this happening and everyone being more productive, everyone being more effective, but is this serving our biological side? Is this making us happier in that sense? So I think those are the questions that we need to ask. And I think once you turn schools into like factory lines and you forget about all of those things, you're just like, okay, I want them to get a high score at something, or they just want to be super productive and super efficient. But I think even school has failed us in that sense, right? It's like we probably learn many things, many useful things, but also not schooling, society has failed us in that sense, which is like you're just a bit at loss. I think after like, okay, you are able to do that. You can speak so many languages. You can do this and A and B and C, but how about making friends? How about being genuine? How about
I think you
actual
make
things
so
that
many
maybe
good
wouldn't make
points
you
here.
biological? Yeah. So yes, I think those
Because
are the points. Broader sense of school. You're
I've
teaching a
always had a
species,
lot
right?
of criticism of school and also uni. If you think of higher education, where I'm like, this is so specialized, and at the time of uni, I didn't know what do I actually want to do. Like, why am I learning this? Um, but in terms of what you just said, I feel like especially high school, 100% hasn't failed me. Like, so many of the people I consider my closest friends are still from high school, despite me living in a completely different country. I feel like this completely makes me think very differently about school, and yeah, it's taught me so many social skills. That's an extremely good point. And also to what you mentioned with actually the way kids learn English these days. I mean, I went to high school 20 years ago at this point, or I graduated 15 years ago, but most of the English I learned as well was playing video games. So like
Yeah.
even
Don't tell that to parents. It's our little secret. But yeah, of
well, they
course.
know,
Like yeah,
but like
yeah,
20 years ago already, that was a thing. Maybe going as well into what you mentioned earlier as well, like how to manage the class or being in class. How do you manage these different things of, as well, you said some of those kids just really crave attention and approval. How do you then teach them to wait, be patient, wait their turn? How do you teach them to interact? How do you make sure that they actually focus on the task that they're meant to do, which is learning English, even though you said, well, you should be kinder to yourself, maybe
yeah.
also be kinder to the kid, which I assume you do.
Yeah, I think that's also a really, really good question. I want to answer like in two ways. I'll say like first the philosophical way and then the practical way. I would say something that I was really interested, like I learned during like a course that I took, like an extension course with like about young learners, is that they usually answer to your lead, as in like classroom management starts you with you managing yourself, managing your expectations and managing what you want, but also if you lose control, you're pretty much giving the green light for everyone. It's like they're pretty much going
Yeah.
to follow your lead in many ways. That's also what I've learned because I'm usually very energetic. Sometimes my classes get rowdy because they are answering to that. It's okay.
To jump in here, I
Yeah.
spoke to a teacher not too long ago. She was a math teacher, and she said the number one rule is you can never show fear. Does that fall into this exact thing what you're saying? Like manage yourself, show you're in control. Don't be scared. Don't let them feel like they can control you in any way.
I think fear is a strong word. I think it makes more sense in the West world. I think here there is still like a, because I've heard stories. I mean, I went to Brazil school and like honestly, the different schools, of course, private schools and public schools.
This was
I
in
mean,
the UK,
definitely
by the way.
public. Yeah, but even I think the UK is getting feral these days. But I've heard so many people who are coming here teaching from Italy or Spain or Brazil or, and they're saying, "Oh, here it's still very nice, man. Like the kids are not bringing knives, and they're not throwing stuff at you." Like, so maybe I
Well, her
think that's
perspective
some.
was not from a like
No, not yeah, no,
violence,
no, no. But
because
even yeah, but
she
even
was
like
like
the
in a private school.
rebellious, yeah, but even the
Yeah,
rebellious kind of nature of like they're gonna question your authority, right? Like they're gonna they as they should, like they're gonna see like what's up with you. I was just taking the piss with the whole fear thing because yeah, it is slightly different. I'd say still it's changing here. Like they're moving from a more to that. I would say. But as the first thing I would say, like, is just manage your fear or manage your anxiety. Just manage your emotions in that sense. Some shit's gonna happen, especially. I mean, with adults a bit less frequently. With teenagers, it can happen. I think teenagers and younger kids, of course, more chances of things going wrong. Just don't get flustered, I would say. Is just anticipate. Even like sometimes accidents are gonna happen. Is like I've seen teachers quitting their job because maybe the kids were running during break and one fell and cracked their
yeah,
head open. Not that bad, I'd say, but it's still like some blood
yeah.
and it's just like traumatized because like it's under my watch and it's a lot of responsibility and but just like making sure that you do what you can. I think it's a good thing most schools that I've worked for centers have like cameras, so it's like it's a very clear like safe space in that sense. So it's like if kids running and they hurt themselves, they know it has nothing to do with me. There are other issues in other societies also with how much trust is allocated to the teachers. Like I'm just happy that we have a camera because no one can question like what you're
Yeah.
doing and you can clearly see those kind of things. I think it's also good for the kids safely. But yeah, from this point of view, it's just like just don't get too angry or too frustrated. Or I mean, we all go through those emotions, but you don't have to, of course, show a poker face. But it's just like under control. It's like these are having a framework is like having some techniques. I think first thing also having very clear rules, especially when you are a foreigner. They don't know what you expect of them. Like so, it's just maybe first lesson if they're very young, you can use flashcards with like very clear and you demonstrate, okay, raise your hand, sit properly, don't fight, like all those very visual things. And just make sure you demonstrate you have someone. Kids get it. Like you can do a quick, even very young learners, like a quick role play. Can you do this? No, not good. Like you can kind of develop that and have a reinforcement system. You can have point systems. I've been trying not to these days because point systems also they're very similar to that dopamine hit of like doing well. Okay, star
Oh,
for you
okay.
doing that,
Because you're
but
gamifying real life.
yes, but sometimes like it's just not feasible. Sometimes like kids go and if you don't do that because you cannot with kids it's very hard. I mean, especially if they don't speak. But even if they do speak English very well and they're 6 or 7, your rationale is very different how you do things. So maybe you think you're
Yeah.
being reasonable, and for them is like so you don't want to sit down. That's something I've learned in the beginning. I used to be very frustrated. Some kids speak really good English, and I will sit them down, and they will say like amazing things. It's like, oh yeah, I understand it. They sound like mini adults, but then once they get into the classroom, they're like we had agreed. Like you kind of feel like angry at them because they're like, but they realize no, it's like the way that they reason, they do things is different. They're motivated by different things. So it's just rules. I would say it's a safe way to start. Like ground rules. What do you expect? If you do that, this is what's going to happen. Consistent action and consequence, especially with difficult classes. I'll say like I love when they don't need any classroom management system. Sometimes if teenagers they don't need that, they're just motivated and they are they get what you mean, they respect you. That's the dream scenario. But I would say 90% of the classes now you do have to do that and to have really clear expectations, and you go from there. But yeah, I would say like you can create point systems. You can create, depends on how much you like collaboration or competition. So I would say get to know what works for them. Some classes are very competitive, so maybe it's not the best way to break them into groups. I used to do this, used to work really well with one class. I'm going to give an example. You can, every day we learn, we assign 4 random things, and you give like, oh, today you are the captain. You can choose your, just like you want to play football, and they kind of have like this kind of thing. It used to be really good to motivate those students who don't care about me, but they care about
Yeah.
peer approval, and they're like, I don't want to let someone. And also like when it's their turn to be the captain, like, a kid who always misbehaves, like, okay, today I'm the captain, so I have to choose my team and I have to do it. So the role playing thing is really powerful with kids, like making sure, okay, you have the role of the captain, or even like joking around with like, okay, very young learners, okay, this is being very loud, bomb loud. I don't like bomb loud. I like ninja quiet. Okay, now we're all
Yeah.
ninjas. Being playful. I don't think that's actually my strong point. I've observed teachers are really good at that. Like they really get into characters, and they're just really good at like creating all those storylines and all of those things. It's
Does
amazing
that
to see
matter
them
as well
like
for
work.
the age of the kid? Like, I guess for younger kids who might want to be more
Yeah,
playful,
for younger
teenagers.
kids, yeah, I think being playful is always good as adults. I don't know. I think it's just my personality. I think bringing something lighthearted, especially, I think we would assume the other way around, but especially here because kids study so much, like high schoolers, they go to school all day. Sometimes you crack a joke or you say something stupid or you just blurbs one of their memes, and they feel a bit more, they feel a bit closer to you, and they feel, okay, I can make mistakes, I can talk some shit, like I don't have to be so like uh protocolar or like so hierarchical with my teacher, which in some ways is good, some ways is bad. I think the hardest thing is just like you have to get to know them and have to gauge. It gets a bit easier as time goes by because you somehow start profiling people, as in not like, as in, okay, I've seen this happening before, so I've tried with these frameworks, and curiously enough, you do start seeing some patterns, which is, I don't know if just my brain kind of creating an easier way to like shortcuts, and maybe those patterns are unfair. It's just me like trying to find those shortcuts, but you kind of already have like some different things, and you can always refer back to experience. So it's very hard to find like at this point unsolvable cases. I mean, there are, don't get me wrong, but like you kind of have like, you go back to your teaching tools and you just can refer back to some of those things. Okay, I'm gonna try this system, I'm gonna break them into teams and allocate captains, or I'm gonna do individual, or I'm gonna do like a collective reward or collective punishment. Like you kind of try to think of different ways. But there are some common techniques. But I've been experimenting, and for me, I would say those work the most with me. But maybe I'm also part of the problem, right? Because I'm training them. That's something that I heard from a peer, and it's like, they can love your class, you can gamify it, but then when someone wants to do a longer project, so how do we balance that? I think those are the existential questions for teachers. Is like, do I want to do it very project based and very like open ended, but no immediate reward, but maybe they're not engaged. Maybe it's much harder for them to get motivated, or do I want them get highly motivated and playing games, but also they already know those skills, so they're not training anything that they don't not already know from their tablets or
So
something. So
what I
yeah.
find very interesting here, in terms as well of making some kids captains and take over responsibilities, I think that's actually a very good tip for probably any other career or anyone who's any form of manager, because I can also relate from my own job. Whenever my manager gives me any bigger task, especially if it's something that I also find somewhat interesting, yeah, it helps if it's more interesting. But if she gives me the responsibility to manage it end to end, especially if it's at a level of responsibility that I feel comfortable with, that probably makes me work the hardest and makes me feel the most engaged at work.
Yeah.
um, and then as well, whenever I work on some projects where I'm a bit closer with peers, and as well where I feel like, yeah, there's the end value is important for everyone, and then I get approval from everyone. So
Hmm.
a lot of these things that you say about these kids and how to manage these kids, I can see definitely relates as well to us adults, because I definitely want my colleagues to think well of me. It's like, hey, Seb did a good job. So by me being responsible for something, makes me work hard and feel appreciated and in control. And then as well, if it's a project with several people in there, where people will be like, "Hey, thanks, Seb, for the work. That was good work."
Mhm.
All of these things definitely drive me.
Yeah.
Um,
I have
yeah,
a legit question though. Like, it's my turn to ask you one question though, if you allow me that.
yeah. Go ahead.
Because like I don't know how is the work culture like in other industries. Like I think you work with like as a data analyst, right?
Yeah,
With education, for many reasons, I would say historic reasons, I would say it's always like I do agree. I think there's a great surgeon. I do love when my line manager, it's like, hey, do you want to take something more, like the delegate, or they're like asking you to get involved. And I think that's also my mindset. I usually do enjoy doing more things. I do feel like teaching, because historically it's getting underpaid, and it's a lot of work. There's always a pushback, even when something that could make you grow. So like the fact that someone is like delegating or asking you to get involved, I see many peers or people that say, "Oh, there's extra work. How much do I get paid for?" I mean, and I get it. Like we all have this kind of balance, but I don't know. Like I do feel that sometimes the work that we do is good for ourselves as well. Like maybe we're like, okay, if I were to do this, it's not just about that, but or not even about career progression, but it's just me about feeling more like I'm able to start a project and finish a project, and I feel like
yeah,
I think more about myself. But I do feel, for example, that our field, and I do think we are right to do that in some ways, but it's becoming very transactional. Funnily enough, there are even some kids where I feel like they're like, what do I get out of it? And like it's like even when you delegate or like when you give an assignment, they're like, what's my reward? Does this happen? Is there like a work culture that you see, like having experienced other industries? Do you feel that like sometimes people try new things, they try new frameworks, and they try to delegate, but there is this like pushback because maybe there's some lack of trust, or maybe just because it's very transactional these days?
okay. If I summarize your question, I guess your question is more like, what does someone want to really be motivated, and as well maybe the counter question then for the businesses or the employer of any kind is, how do you get the most out of your employee? Do I understand
Yeah.
your question right? Is that kind of what you want to know?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way. But it's more like, do you see like, so when I do that to a student, sometimes I'm seeing that from a teacher's perspective, right? So I
Yeah,
think I feel like I'm delegating, I'm giving something to do. But what about those students that maybe see, this is still an imposed role by the teacher. I didn't ask for the
yeah.
responsibility. I don't want the responsibility. So yeah, my question goes along the lines that you just said, but also is it the only way to I don't know, like sometimes I worry about when I try something new, because every time you try something new, it comes with redesigning
Yeah.
structures. Comes with redesigning structures. It's more work. When you take a bigger project from a boss, it's more work. Nowadays in our industry, I mean, maybe many others. That's why I'm asking, because I want to know. More work
I th-
means.
yeah, I think there's a lot of different things going on at the same time. I know, especially in the software engineering industry, where oftentimes for managers or for other stakeholders, kind of the output and the amount of work that goes in is a bit of a black box. I know a lot of people who will say, well, this project, oftentimes we work in something called a sprint, which is 2 weeks mostly. So you say, in these 2 weeks, I will do this. Oftentimes, I also see people game the system a bit and say, well, this small project will take me 2 weeks, even though it takes them half a week or a week. So it kind of goes both ways in this system. So I can imagine kids as well sometimes really try to minimize the work for the output. Then, of course, sometimes a manager tries to give you more work than what you think you can chew or than what you get paid for. Um,
Mhm.
and in this case, well, we're adults, but we're still emotional beings. I hope
Mhm.
most people know how to push back, but I guess that's as well something, a skill set that a lot of people still are trying to learn. Like, how much can you push back?
Mhm.
Negotiation is a big skill. Like, I don't think everyone knows, including myself, how to properly negotiate to like
Teachers don't as
how
well.
much. Yeah.
We're very bad at that. That's why we lost like so many losses in the past.
And then in terms of the system as well changing, like a lot of companies have been very remote friendly, especially for the jobs like anything tech wise. And a lot of them are now asking employees to come back at least a few days a week. And I think there are very different results on it. Like, I have days where I go to the office and I feel very productive. I have days where I go to the office where I'm like, I would have been better off at home because I would have been so much more focused. So my employer should have rather let me stay at home. So I think it, yeah,
Yeah, it was
I think
a tricky question. Yeah,
yeah,
finish it.
I think there's not like a very direct answer, but I think among adults and companies, people try to game the system in both directions. How to maximize your gain. Actually, a follow up question I was going to ask you in terms of all of this. I think oftentimes it depends as well on what motivates a person and what
Yeah,
really two things I keep on playing with the whole time, and actually something I wanted to ask you as well at the end of this podcast is what gives you joy or fulfillment in life? Because maybe before you answer, the reason I also asked this is in this context is maybe some people really get a lot of joy from just learning stuff short term. So if you give them more than they can chew, they're like, hell yeah, let's do this. They just see this. The learning is the reward for some people. Some people, the working is just a means to an end so they can pay for all the hobbies that they have in life. So if then suddenly you give them more to do than what they think they're paid for, they'll be like, hell no, I'm not doing this because this is not what brings me joy or fulfillment in life. So I think in short, I think that is a bit where I feel the answer is, because at work for myself right now, without going too much into detail, is I try to do more technical tasks so that I can develop in my career, whether it's at the same company, another company as well, figuring out how to leverage AI the most. Because in terms of my work as well, a lot of stuff will be working. I just completed a whole project where AI wrote the whole code. I just had to put in the right prompts and review the code and maybe rewrite minor things. Um, and in terms of fulfillment as well, I could spend a lot more time at work, but I'm choosing to have engaging conversations with you and trying to learn exactly about what makes people happy and what makes people fulfilled, and a lot learn what can I learn from other people in terms of people management, in this case from teaching. Like there's so much you said that I can just relate to, and in case I ever go into a management role, I'm quite likely to probably think back to this conversation with you, Greg, and be like, hey, maybe I can gamify it somehow so that they feel a bit more motivated, so or give them maybe a bit more responsibility and play with that scale of responsibility to really get the most out of them. So yeah.
yeah, very very good question. A lot to unpack there. I really believe in or joy, let's say joy or motivation. For me, it got to a point when it's rather simple for me. I think my main motivation is not learning, but it is trying. I've worked with many people at this point. I've had so many frustrating days. I've sometimes pressed the wrong buttons. Some days I had that were amazing. There are so many expectations from kids, from parents. I think the harshest one for me is from myself. That's also I'm learning how to like deal with this. But like we walk into a place. I am from a developing country as well. I know how much money those people are paying for a service. And I know how it was to be bored in a classroom. So I always bring that with me. I have high expectations for myself in many different fields of life. Maybe those were coming from me, maybe those are coming from my parents. The world is very uncertain, like how to have joy with wars going on, AI uncertainty, so many things happening, so much information. Who do I talk to? Is my friend still going to be my friend? Are they going to be more engaged with their phones than with myself? So many things happening, like so much complexity. I think in the past I was afraid of that, and I would say, "Oh man, it's just so much uncertainty that life is just scary and it's just tough." And I think what teaching has taught me is, or just living or studying or teaching, is just the most important thing I can do is just try. Like the outcome is not really under my control. Like some things are for sure. I think we also want to believe in that, but I do think that if you ask me, Greg, what's the best you can do for me? It's like I can try. I don't know if what I can give you is something good. It can be shit some days. It can be wonderful some days. For me, the joy comes from the fact that I try and I go
can,
back.
can I ask for maybe a bit more explanation? What does it mean for you to try? What do you get out from the try? Do you want to feel like you didn't let someone down, or do
I'm
you
honest
want
with
to feel
myself. No, I'm honest with myself. It's like maybe I failed. Maybe this wasn't enough, but this was the best that I could do. It's
and
like
is
when
this
like
always teaching, or is it just in general in life?
general, like when I play tennis, like sometimes like some people are just better than you. They train harder, they are more athletic. Like even like with like weightlifting, like you lift like double the way that I do, but I'm happy with what I do because, okay, this is my limit for now. And I'm just glad to know that there are people who do this at a better level. And that means that I could live an infinite life and I will never be bored because there is always something that I can do. So like I think that was my fear in the past. I was just like I was living a bit inside my own head, or like some friends would say, I had my head stuck in my own arse many times, and I was just not vulnerable, and I was just not honest to myself, and I was just not accepting and embracing my weaknesses and the things that I did well, and understand that this is okay. It's like no one makes friends with the person who is unrelatable. Like we are all humans. I know it's really we all want to put a facade that we're doing great, everything is going well, but at the end of the day, I think I don't know if I'm gonna be a success. I don't know if I'm gonna achieve what other people consider to be great or even what I consider greatness myself. I wanted to be a writer when I was younger. Today, I don't know. Like I haven't written in a long time, I would say. But for me, it's just trying. I can even tell you a story about my master's. Like when I was at uni doing my bachelor's, I didn't really put a lot of effort. This is the final story, I promise. I was not really putting a lot of effort, but also because I think I was afraid of failing, like of falling short. So I always had this kind of ready-made excuse. It's like, I'm getting 60 or 70% just because, I'm not putting in my best, I'm drinking or I'm seeing other friends or I don't care that much. So I always do things like half-heartedly. I would always come up with already like I would walk into things with like in the back of my mind an excuse. And I was not giving myself fully to the process because I was afraid I would fall short. And I was just falling short. By doing that, I was falling short because I was like not giving myself. And once you realize you've really fucking tried your best, you are really okay with the outcome. Like if I train properly and I do my best and I prepare every day, even for a difficult test, that's the thing about my master's. Like, okay, now I'm going to study properly. I'm going to arrange 20 hours a week to do it. And maybe I'm going to fall short, but that's what I could have done. And I'm okay with the outcome. Maybe I'm not going to get a degree and maybe it's not for me. Maybe it's not the lingo. This is not the kind of thing. And in the past, this probably would devastate me. Like maybe if I'd failed something or if I'd been something that would go against my ego or would somehow hurt me, it would just destroy me to pieces, even like losing a tennis match or something like that. And nowadays, like not joy in losing, it's not the right way, but it's just joy in trying. It's like I'm happier playing someone who plays better than me, but I'm trying my best, than keep winning people or keep beating people whom I know play worse. So I think I've just accepted that like life's much bigger, life's much more complex, and it's part of life to go through all of those stages. And teaching has taught me that it's like it doesn't matter how invested you are. Some days you think like you have the best lesson and you spend 10 fucking hours preparing because it's a topic you really love, and you walk in and everyone is just tired and they're like you are so excited and you can see shit like it's just not. But then some days you're just on a bad day and you walk into the classroom think it's going to be shit and actually you get surprised. But the most important thing is that I keep walking into the class. Is that like I don't know what's going to be the outcome, but I'm still showing up every day. I'm still doing what I should do. And I do think same with like, if you go to the gym, right? If you go angry
I
or
can
sad or
definitely,
upset,
yeah.
if you do that every day, the consistency is like, but if you don't do it, there is nothing coming out of it. If you
I
do it,
know.
there's a good chance there's nothing going to come out of it, but at least you can say, fuck, I did do it, but nothing came out of it, but I did it. So it's still better than, we don't know, like it's a big game, right? Sometimes you roll the dice and it's a great outcome.
I
And
can
sometimes you
definitely
roll the
relate to
dice
what
and
you're
it's
saying
not.
because oftentimes I think the regret of not trying or not or of skipping the gym or not trying to, I know, back in the days apply to this new job or whatever, like the regret would always be bigger than actually trying and failing. Actually, I had one last question back to teaching techniques with a link of trying, because last time we saw each other in person, which was like half a year ago, I think you were in the process of trying to convince a mother that her child should maybe go to special needs class, if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
So from what I remember from the story, and then just to make sure or we're on the same path or same story. I remember this. I think this was a kid which was quite young, but more physically developed than other peers in his age, um, who didn't realize when he was being playful, he almost came across as a bully because he was just stronger, more developed, and so forth. Do you remember the story that I'm
I do, yeah.
referring to? I'm also really curious, like, how do you convince a mother of or an adult of maybe a completely different perspective, because I can see that is a skill set a lot of people need in any career. And I
Yeah.
guess convincing a mother that, hey, your child might not be as perfect as every parent wants to see their kid is an extremely hard task. So I'm kind of curious where what the story was exactly and how you did it or how you approached it and where it went.
Well, I think one, like you don't convince. It's like they're their parents, right? Like they spend the whole time with their kids. And I think that goes in general for we want to believe we convince, but I think a lot of it's also is a decision that people have made themselves. I know I have the best interests in the case of the kid. I know the parents also have the best
Also, maybe can you
interests.
repeat the actual story of
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happened, or
So
what I
yeah,
said
it's
correct?
very spot on. Yeah, you have really good memory. Like so, there was this kid who whom we had some issues, but not because he was. I mean, I really assume so that he was not behaving. He was like 9 or 10, maybe something like that. So, and he just couldn't really control his emotions, and he was a bit clumsy. Looking back now, like as teachers, we cannot diagnose people, right? So that's the thing. Like now, I have some years of study, so maybe I think now I still cannot because of school procedures, and I should not. But I think at least for me to deal with this on a daily basis, I could I can probably now see based on the symptoms maybe what kind of condition he had. But basically, what I had to do was like trying to convince the parent that like maybe this is not the most like the expectations that you have and this kind of environment. He needs an opinion from an expert or someone from outside to try and help because I don't think he's personally misbehaving or he's not personally rebelling or he's not hurting people or being rude to people on purpose. I just think that, as I said, like I think that maybe he has a different, neurodivergent. He basically has a different
Yeah.
speed at developing, or maybe he's developing other skills, right? Like I'm not saying that he is or not autistic, but there is a theory of autism called weak central coherence that basically says it's just different pathways of development. Whilst we are really good at seeing context and the global picture, many autistic people are really good at seeing the details and they're just really like. So this could be an example. Like they just don't get the same verbal cues or the non-verbal cues that we have. So basically could come across as really rude or really angry or really clumsy and something. So I'm not saying he was or was not autistic, but I'm just saying that there are different pathways of development, and maybe
Yeah.
he was in one that I couldn't really fully support, and I needed to have more information from the parents. So basically, what we do is like try to arrange a meeting and ask, is this happening also in his school? What do you hear from his peers or from other teachers? I don't know how it is in the UK in these days. I think it's a bit more liberal, I would say. Like in Asia, mental health and it's still like a taboo. Like people really, I've heard from parents before say, hey, don't treat my kid differently. I want you to have the same standards because, they're so worried that they're not going to have the same chances. And I mean, it's coming from a good place, right? They're just worried that they're going to be
Yeah.
somehow like be left behind. So I get that. So knowing that they have the best interests and I have the best interests, I'm not going to convince them to see a psychologist, but I'm just going to lay the fact and say like I just worry because I think he's a bit unhappy and he's getting frustrated and his classmates are getting frustrated and of course I don't say it out loud, but like I myself feel that I'm letting myself down because I'm out of depth and I feel like I cannot fully support him. So then you have an honest conversation and say, hey, I think he has a lot of potential. I think this is what happens sometimes. I really believe he's not doing it on purpose because he's really young and he seems to be really distressed when those things happen and when
Yeah.
people stop playing with him. And I think he has these needs, but we just need more information. We just need more attention. So we just lay down the facts. Sometimes I get positively surprised as the parents disclose and they're really happy. Actually, oftentimes when I open like this in a non-discriminatory and just legit saying like maybe it's better for him to, you take the money out of the English course and, invest it in somewhere else. I know like people at sales hate me when I do that, but like sometimes it's just legit. Like they will come back, when they figure it
Yeah.
out, but it's just at that point their well-being is more important in that case. So when you mention about convincing, regardless of parents or who you are talking, is like first, if you know it's coming from a place where people are really interested in your well-being, you're more likely to listen. either way, I have no power whether you're convinced or not. Like, you can convince me to eat healthily, or you can say, but like, and I know you have the best interest, but also I need to get all of that information, and I need to reach a breaking point or decision point where it is personal. What I can do is provide information, say what I think, and really believe that I have the best interest. Like, maybe I'm wrong. That's the thing, the difficult thing, or maybe it's not the best way, but I go to bed, going back to the trying thing, I sleep well because I think, okay, I'm trying, like, I'm legit not trying to just take money out of them. And I think that's the most important. I might be wrong, but I'm trying and I'm giving an honest opinion, and being honest is the most important thing in that sense.
So if a parent is being a bit difficult about it or doesn't want to hear it, how do you make sure that they at least hear your point?
I'll say,
Like, how
like,
do you get their attention?
have you asked your kid how they feel? Because he looks a bit sad. Like, I usually say, like, his friends don't want to play with him because he shouts or he gets angry or they feel a bit scared because he loses control. And I don't think he's a bad kid. I think he really wants to play, but he doesn't know how to play it, and he makes him feel really sad. And like, it breaks my heart because I look at them and I see that they're sad, they're frustrated, they're upset, and they are still a kid. That's usually what I say with kids. I don't know with adults, but it's like, it's really good that they are kids and they're behaving like this now, because if they were 18 or 20, maybe they would be facing the prisonal system and not the educational system. So right now is the best time to act. Right now is the time to, look for things that are happening, because I myself am much more patient with kids than with adults. So I do think, like, it's good. He's in the right place. We can spot some things and we can course correct, or not course correct, but at least try to find what's the best way for the kid to be the happiest they can be. And when they're 20, no one is gonna, like, his professor at uni is not gonna say, "Hey, your kid's very nice, but he doesn't know how to behave." He's just gonna say, "Dude, if you go and shout at someone, they might just press criminal charges against them." So he's just like, "Hey, this is what I think. I think he's a really good kid, has a lot of potential." And most cases, it is really that's what I think. I don't think people are born with this.
So you
I
just
don't
try to
want to.
be really genuine, and as well from the example you gave, you started with just some very human problems, like, hey, we think your kid has maybe, or it doesn't seem as happy, so just like very high level, something that is more sounds like a caring thing than actually pointing fingers. Is that how I see you approach it?
100%. 100%. I
Yeah,
think, like, I don't fully believe in convincing, as I told you, but I think if you are trying to persuade, sometimes also no one likes point fingering. I'd say, right? No one likes.
yeah,
It is just everyone likes to talk at the same level. It's like, I'm being transparent, I'm being honest. Some people are really good at
yeah,
not pretending they're doing this, but like, maybe that's why they're really good at convincing. But for me, it's like, I don't care about you convincing or not. Like, this is my honest take on it, and I know that I have the best interest. I might be wrong, but the reason why I can sit opposite to you and have this chat is just because, like, yeah, I care about it too, and that's the best I can do. Sometimes I think, is it the right thing? I think I used to question myself quite a lot. Like, I don't know, is this the right way? Maybe I'm giving the wrong advice. Maybe I'm saying the wrong thing. Maybe they're taking the kid out of school is going to get angrier. That's what I said about trying. It's like, we don't know, like, the outcome of our decisions. We don't know if you're right or wrong. Ultimately, we might all be going to the completely wrong direction. But are you trying? Are you course correcting? Are you being honest on your path? I think that's what I try to ask myself. Is like, maybe it's the wrong way, but am I being honest whilst I'm on it? And the answer these years is mostly being yes. So I can live with the outcome. Maybe it's not all flowers, all incredible, but I am trying, and I feel happy and proud of myself in some ways. And like, I can say, yeah, like, it's not going that way, but it's not because I'm not trying or I'm not doing something. And I'm okay with that. Like, I'm okay being a mediocre athlete. I'm okay being a mediocre in many senses. Just the fact that I'm trying it, I think it makes me outstanding in my own way, special in my own way. Like, I would
you are
frame it. So
special.
I think that's the main thing. So for me, that's one of the joys. It's hard, but it's also rewarding in that sense. So it's pretty cool. Working with people is great, man. Like, it's hard, and if you ask at the wrong time, I would say, oh, I hate it. I'm so fucking tired. I wish, but like, at the end of the day, like, you have so much to think about that if you do allow yourself some time to think, it's pretty good therapy.
One last question. What is the last thing you've learned from kids? Or is there something kids have taught you that you actually take with you every day?
Joy, man, the curiosity. Like, I think that's the best aspect. That's why it makes me sad when you see kids, losing that and being skeptical, just being stupidly curious about something. like just being maybe completely wrong and your assumption is so stupid, but just being so free spirited that you can be completely off and you still enjoy a surprise. And I think that's, oh man, that's one of the things that I really enjoy working with kids, is that they're just so stupidly curious and everything is so surprising. And they always have this kind of like this sense of revelation. And we are stupid, man. We lose this sense as we grow older. And we should not, because like it's just like the more like you start looking inwards and you forget that you have all of that. So I think that is the main reason I still get the energy. It's tiring in many ways, and maybe in a few years I might, but for all of these years, I think I'm very grateful just for the opportunity of like sharing a space with kids who have so much energy and so much curiosity, and like all that spark that maybe you feel like sometimes you lose in life because of all of the things that life throws at you, and maybe all of the bad models of human beings that you come across. And yeah, and then you look at kids and like, yeah, like we do as a species, we also do have so many like cool and incredible things. And I wish, I don't want to incorporate all that they have. I don't want to shit in my pants and stuff like that.
Oh,
but I
it
do
comes back
think
once you're old, though. By the way, just so you know.
yeah, it's a full cycle. But just being a bit more like care less about what other people think in that sense, and just like, I'm generally curious. I want to learn more about this, and I don't care if people value this or don't value this, or I can play with both boys and girls and not care about like. Actually, I like about 5 and 6 because they're still not really like into social groups. When they turn 7, usually they're like, I don't want to play with them, and you can see.
That's
but
very
like
interesting.
when they're 4 or 5 or 6, they don't lie that much, and they're just happy to play with whomever or whatever, whichever time. And I think, yeah, that's something whenever it gives you like, dealing with young people, I think you always get this burst a little bit, this spark that sometimes you forget. So that it's hard. I would say you cannot do that for your whole life, but
I think
it's
that's
something that I recommend everyone at some point in their lives to work maybe 6 months with kids, like 1 year, just to, for the good and for the bad, but just,
I'll
they are
take
the
a
future of our
sabbatical. Come
species.
to
So
Vietnam.
yeah, just just once in your lifetime, feel scared, feel afraid yourself, like, oh my god, and then have some fun and have some. So yeah,
I think that was honestly probably couldn't have given a better answer to that. And with that said, thank you for letting me be stupidly curious about your job.
Oh no, I think I enjoyed a lot. Yeah, I'm jealous of your position. Like, yeah, it's a very nice thing that you're doing, and thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I might ask you some questions about that, but yeah, I think it's pretty cool. And thanks for having me and for asking very thoughtful questions and for letting me interrupt you and not interrupting me. I always appreciate that.
All right. Thanks for being on the podcast, Greg.
Thanks, man.
Hey, you made it to the end of the episode. Before you leave, can you please do me this one simple favor and subscribe to the podcast? It's your free and easy way to show your support for all the hard work we put into every single episode, as well as help us reach more people and get new guests onto the show. Thank you for listening to the Untold Paths podcast.